here. I'm not sure if it's due to the content or the timing, but it's good to see so many of you here. Just trying to bring it up. Timmy, try and be patient. So, yeah, Stephanie, good to see you. Cynthia Nielsen, Mel Stiller. Timmy, come this side. Come. Timmy, come here. Oh, wow, that's better than that. Sylvia Rogier, Bria, good to see you here. Monique Dawn, Gemma Meenan, good to see you as well. So in today's live, we're going to deal with, I wanted to deal with another 10 or so pages dealing with the witnesses, but I think because of the amount of kind of content, it's going to be, I'm not sure if we're going to get through all of the witnesses. There's quite a lot to get through. There are really 13 pages dealing with the witnesses in the affidavit from page 46 to 59. But there's quite a lot in each witness statement, especially from Morgan Gentile, and I think she comes up twice. So if you want to follow the, let's just see if I can bring it up here. If you want to follow the actual section in the affidavit that is on this link. Miss Milky the Clown, good to see you. Gigi Jardine, good to see you. Miss T, Marcus Haysom. I actually meant to do this as a members only, but I guess I'll do that from next week or sometime around there. Karina, good to see you. Mel Stella, good to have you here. Andar Warji, hi from Canada. The injury's been pretty good today. I think today, I think the best day was actually Tuesday. Today's, I think, was almost as good as Tuesday. Believe it or not, I had a kind of an impromptu cough about half an hour after the last live. Just about 50% as painful, so it was pretty painful. But I'm trying to anticipate that and try and moderate it. Thanks a lot, Faticus. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, so the other thing is I was quite quiet today. I sort of didn't really do much. I also, at one point, had to unload my bike. Still been on my back of my car, and I asked my brother to do that, so that sort of thing helps. So I'm just trying not to overextend myself too much. But I've got to say, sleeping was an absolute nightmare last night. I got little snatches here and there. So Monique Dawn, good to see you. Pauline Buckles, been a while since we've seen you. Paul Jacobs, good to be on board. From Ogden, Utah. Okay, so this is really interesting as well. You know, if you think that what came out from Barry's statements is interesting, there's also a lot of meat and potatoes from the witnesses. There are a lot of witnesses. Some of them are friends of Suzanne. Some of them are friends of Barry's. So, and some of them have known Barry for 20 years. So it's quite interesting seeing what they say, right? Marcel van Skype, good evening. Thanks for keeping it open to us all. I really enjoy these lives from Pretoria. Medicate yourself prior to sleep. I do. I take 2 pain pills that do make me sleepy, but it only lasts for about 2 hours. anyway, I'm sort of seeing it like an endurance contest. I've just got to get through 6 weeks, right? LB, hi from Australia. Vicky says, hi everyone. Ali Cat, good to see everyone. Okay, let's get started. See, wow, there are already over 100 people in chat. And we're going to start with Morgan Gentile. Just going to the notes that I've made, or the highlights that I've made. Do you guys want to hear a joke? Timmy, do you want to hear a joke? There it is, okay. Karina says yes. Okay, so here's the joke. A guy goes to a doctor and he's got like, beans sticking out of his nose, and he's got like a cauliflower stuffed into his one ear and a broccoli in the other ear. And he's got a big carrot stuck in his rear end, right? So he sort of kind of waddles into the doctor's, office or whatever. And he's like, doctor, can you help me? I don't know what's going on, right? And the doctor says to him, you're not eating right. Yeah, that's the joke. That's the joke I heard yesterday. I thought it was pretty good. Okay, so we're going to start off with Morgan Gentile, and she's the first witness, right? So on May 14th, 4 days after the incident, the first person they want to speak to besides Barry is Morgan Gentile, and guess who's interviewing her? It's CBI agent Kevin Kobach. He's one of the agents, and the other one is Joseph Cahill. And it's a consensual recorded interview, and they do this recording with Morgan Gentile in Salida, Colorado, right? Morgan stated that around July 2019, she returned to Salida and started to work at Dieselin Structures Incorporated, DSI. She first met Barry through DSI, and they've worked together frequently. So just in a broad sort of way, she's known Barry for, in terms of at the time of Suzanne's disappearance, around about a year, right? In January 2020, Morgan was terminated from DSI over allegations that she used illegal drugs. I've circled this in my copy of the affidavit, though she asserted she did not use drugs. So she's terminated over allegations. I don't know if it's rumors. It would be interesting to know what those allegations were, who said it, what that involved. But that was the scenario. And then after she was terminated, Barry hired her as a contractor for his company. Now, I think what's quite interesting with this is you kind of have two possible scenarios. The one scenario is that Morgan is a honest, innocent, hardworking, good employee, and she was unfairly accused of something. She was wrongly accused or falsely accused, and all of the stuff about drugs is completely made up. That's the one scenario. And so Barry hiring her is almost like Barry coming to her rescue. But the other scenario is that, who knows, maybe there's some merit to the allegations, and one wonders, if there is some merit to those allegations and Barry hired her anyway, what do you think that says? And that's why I think it's quite important to know about that. It definitely is quite difficult in the murky world of folks who use drugs knowing what's true and what isn't, because the people who are often witnesses to that are other drug addicts, and they don't really want to be forthcoming. So, it's quite a difficult thing to prove either way, but it certainly is an important area to try and gain some kind of clarity, right? I guess you'd want to know who Morgan's friends are, and perhaps her family as well, and find out from them what they know about her backstory, right? Is this thing about illegal drugs grounded on anything or not? Nevertheless, Barry hires her as a contractor for his company, Sunset Farms Landscaping. And under that, I just put a little question mark. Does that mean something or doesn't it? And Patricia writes a really good thing as she says, I thought he hated drugs in his own wife. That's a really good point. So it goes on to say, and I guess this is what Morgan says, Barry frequently talks to Morgan about his two daughters. He has never spoken of any marital or other family issues. There feels like a slight overlap here between Morgan and Nicole Kessinger, just in the sense that Nicole Kessinger also said that Chris Watts often spoke about his daughters, right? And didn't speak badly about his wife, something like that. Barry told Morgan about the Broomfield job sometime in mid-April 2020. So the Broomfield job seems to come up sort of quite late in the fabric. But at the same time, what is quite strange about the Broomfield job is that it's postponed repeatedly. And one's got to wonder, were other jobs also postponed repeatedly? So it would also be good to know who asked him to do this job and what was the actual deadline from the client's perspective. So Morgan stated that the job was supposed to take place between April 23rd and April 30th. However, she was not sure of the exact date. Barry then changed the job to take place on or about the first week of May. Barry then rescheduled the job to begin on May 11, 2020. So the job's supposed to begin May 11, 2020. So why is he going there on May 10, right? Just something to consider. Morgan stated on May 8th, 2020, remember, Suzanne was probably killed the next day, May 9th, and then she disappeared Mother's Day, May 10th. Morgan stated on May 8th, 2020, Barry picked her up from Anytime Fitness, that's at 9985 Highway 50 in Poncha Springs, Colorado. Now, bear in mind, that's where he lives at the moment. After Barry sold his Puma Path home, he moved to Poncha Springs. So something to just think about in a general way is that Barry doesn't pick Morgan Gentile up at her home. He picks her up at a gym. The other thing is that Barry also is a kind of a fitness dude. He also exercises. And so I think one can kind of ask the question, is it unusual for a construction boss to pick his employee up at the gym, his female employee up at the gym? Question mark. Anyway, and then from the gym, they traveled to a job site at 6962 County Road, 105 Salida. They arrived at around 8 a.m. So I guess he picked her up early at the gym. So she first goes to gym, then they go directly to the job site from the gym. And there they completed a rock beach project and left. Now, my father owned a construction company, and I would say, 100% of his employees were male because of the nature of the work. It's sort of very It's physical. It is difficult work. I'm not saying you can't have a woman do construction work. I just think it's a little bit strange that you would have a female as your right-hand man kind of thing. I think it might be a little bit strange, but maybe it's not strange. So maybe the Rock Beach project, they didn't have to pick up very big rocks, but one just needs to ponder whether what we're talking about is completely normal and ordinary or something else. So at around 11 a.m., Barry took her back to her vehicle by Anytime Fitness. So Barry picks her up at the gym and drops her back off at the gym as well. It's interesting that he doesn't pick her up at home and drop her off at home. And also, it's also interesting that she doesn't just go to the job site on her own. You know, that she doesn't drive there herself and drive back herself. And so I guess on that day, they're together for around about 3 hours in the morning. He pays her in cash for the job, which is also quite interesting, and leaves. Morgan said that Barry mentioned he was going to go hiking or biking. Barry was supposed to pick Morgan up at around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, May 10th. So he's not going to see her at all on Saturday, but he will see her kind of late in the day on Sunday, and they will then drive to a hotel. So on the one day, he picks her up from a gym. On another day, on a weekend, they're going to drive to a hotel in another city and sleep over at that hotel. Not necessarily in the same room, but certainly at a hotel. Cassidy Cordova was supposed to drive up separately and meet them on Monday. Now, one wonders what that's all about. Is Cassidy Cordova sort of a cover, you know, that everything's above board? You know, the fact that there's another person there means that nothing's going on? Or is Cassidy Cordova simply just part of the normal quotient of workers? But why is it different with him? Why is he driving up separately? And why does he meet them on Monday? Why must she be there Sunday night and Cassidy must be there on Monday? It just, one wonders what is sort of going on there. So let's just have a look at some of your comments here. Not there yet says, I think Morgan is vulnerable. Pauline says perhaps Barry was paying her under the table so he wouldn't have to pay an employer's tax. I think that is something that is going to be addressed by other witnesses later on, but it's a good point to raise. Marcus says, how do I become a member? I've been looking for a while, but don't seem to be able to find a link. If you're on your desktop, there'll be a little icon next to, at the bottom of the video, saying join. Otherwise, I'm sure Stephanie can put up a link for you. If you go to the description of this video, you'll also get a link to join up. Monique Dawn says, Jim May, just to be in a halfway point to the job site. Nothing to see here. No, nothing suspicious. Absolutely normal. I think what you've got to bear in mind is, so you might say, to me, this looks absolutely normal. I don't see any red flags. I don't even see any orange flags. I think what you've got to bear in mind is Suzanne seemed to suspect Barry of having an affair, actually having affairs plural, right? So either Suzanne, who's Barry's former wife, was wrong and was wrong for a number of years, or possibly she wasn't wrong. If she wasn't wrong, who are these individuals? And it could be individuals plural. And so you've got to sort of wonder who they could be, and you've got to kind of, I won't say make a list, but you've got to consider a few people and either include or exclude them. So I wouldn't be too hasty to sort of make excuses for certain people. I think what you want to do is have a kind of a scout mindset and you want to gather the information. You want to gather enough information you can to make a educated, I won't say decision, but get an educated impression or opinion on this question. Mel Stiller says Suzanne suspected Barry of having affairs before she started communicating with Jeff. So that's the other thing, is you could also make the argument that, again, we don't know for sure, but if Barry had been having affairs, let's say, even before they moved to Colorado, it's a question. If Barry had been having affairs before they moved to Colorado, which is, I think, around before 2018, then could he or would he have had affairs after he moved to Colorado? Right? That's sort of the question we're kind of asking. Stephanie says maybe they're holding evidence of affairs close to their chest and will come out at trial, ? Yeah. So I just want you guys to kind of keep an open mind here, in a sense. Marcel van Skyke, welcome to the TCRS Transit Lounge. She's just become a member. Thanks a lot for that. B says some men feel emotional affairs don't count. So I'm not sort of here to say, well, these are all the signs pointing to an affair. Or these are all the signs not pointing to the affair. We're simply going to this witness statement to say, what are we seeing? What should we think about? What should we have a little bit of critical thinking on? That's all. I'm not trying to make one case or another. We're still trying to kind of make up our minds. We're still trying to gather the information. I just think it's quite strange that Barry goes to a hotel on Mother's Day, irrespective of what happened to Suzanne. His plan is to go to a hotel with a woman, and someone else would join him the next day. I just think that that's interesting. And that is within the context of him or his wife, or I don't know, I guess there's some marital discord, and his wife kind of wants to get a divorce, and there is an issue of infidelity going on in their conversations. That's all. So anyway, Morgan said that this is quite important to note, Morgan said that around 4 a.m. on May 10, 2020, she was confident that she heard Barry's Ford F-350 drive eastbound past her house on Highway 50. So that's also quite an important point to make, is that's actually where Morgan lives, kind of on Highway 50. And that is part of the route that Barry drives, as far as I understand. He drives that route, a kind of indirect route to get to Broomfield. And that's also kind of where the mountain bike, in that sort of area, that's where the mountain bike and the helmet are left. It's just quite interesting that. The interesting thing is, she says she thinks she hears his truck at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then she says she didn't see the truck, but that his truck has a very distinctive exhaust. Right? It's quite an interesting thing to say. We're not going to deal with right now whether that is true or not, based on the metadata, the analytics of the truck. I think it's more important at this point just to just to note the time that she thinks she hears him, and that is at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Then at about 11:18 a.m. on May 10, so arguably, almost 7.5 hours later, after hearing the sound, Barry calls Morgan and says she needs to bring an additional person because of the amount of work needed to repair the wall. And one wonders what that's about. Is that a legitimate thing that Barry wants someone else brought along? Or is there kind of a scenario, and this is kind of conspiracy theory, where Barry's kind of getting, who knows, Barry might be wondering what other people might be thinking if, someone finds out that she's staying there that night. So maybe someone else is staying there, they won't think that. One wonders just what his thought process is. And so she agrees she'll bring along Jeff Puckett, right? So this part I find really, really fascinating. And I put 2 kind of exclamation marks next to it. Barry never provides an explanation why he left early or why he did not pick her up. So Barry makes plans for that Mother's Day, for May 10th, to meet some of his employees at this hotel, right, in Broomfield. And then he never does meet them, but he doesn't say why. He doesn't say why he's left early. He doesn't say why he's left early at the time. And he also doesn't say why he doesn't pick her up, right? Then it says, Morgan stated she later picked up Jeff and drove towards Broomfield. Now remember, Barry was supposed to pick her up. So it ends up that she picks up Jeff, and then at 6:09 p.m., really late, that's when Barry finally calls. And he says that there's a family emergency. It's quite vague, isn't it? He doesn't say, my wife is missing, or something specific like that. We don't know where my wife is, or I don't know where Suzanne is. It's this vague, there's a family emergency, and he's got to return to Salida. So I sort of wonder, if no one called 911, what would Barry have done? Wouldn't he have spent the night in Broomfield, right? Wasn't that the plan, to spend the night in Broomfield? But because 911 was called, he was sort of summoned back. And so Barry left his tools at the hotel, and he said he would call Morgan the next day. It's quite interesting. He leaves the tools at the hotel. You could sort of say, is that to show that I was there and I'm coming back, or to place himself there? Aren't your tools quite valuable that you need to sort of look after them? You could also argue that he left the tools there so that his workers could start working with his tools, except those weren't the right tools to work with anyway. So they couldn't actually start the job, as far as I understand, the next day. I guess one needs to be more specific. Which tools did he leave behind, and which tools were needed, for the job? Also, what was the first activity that needed to take place when they were doing this particular job, right? Then the last little paragraph of Morgan Gentile's first interview, because she gives a couple, on May 11, 2020, at about 7 o'clock in the morning, that's the Monday, Barry called Morgan and said that Suzanne was missing. So now he tells her that Suzanne's missing, and he says he thought a mountain lion may have attacked her. So that's kind of a story he's now told quite a few people. Do you think saying that I think a mountain lion attacked someone, do you think that that's kind of saying I don't think what happens very serious, or we'll probably see her again? Or do you think saying something like a mountain lion attacked her is kind of saying, how can I put it? Don't worry, we'll see her again. Or do you think that that is at a level of seriousness of something beyond that? Anyway, that is his story to her, that a mountain lion attacked her. Now, the other thing just to consider is, remember we talked about anthropomorphism. And so if Barry if Barry is responsible for what happened to his wife, then Barry in his own story is a mountain lion. What do you guys think about that? That's how he sees himself, as a mountain lion. A mountain lion, also known as a bobcat. What a coincidence. Good point, Stephanie. And Warji says he's hoping we're just like, well, guess she's gone. Elizabeth Gregory says, I'm so late. Okay, so now we go to the Jeffrey Puckett interview. Oh, hang on. The final point here is Morgan explained that Barry was this is quite interesting. Morgan explained that Barry was initially crying. I don't know if you remember the body cam footage where Barry arrives kind of at night and he sounds tearful and he asks where the bicycle is and he sort of sounds choked up. Well, I think that's probably what Morgan heard. She said Barry was initially crying, but then she says he abruptly shifted to the specifics about the Broomfield job. So her impression was that Barry sounded emotional, and then he kind of sounded, I guess, clinical and sort of, we need to do this and this and this with the Broomfield job. In other words, he was emotional one moment and seemed, I guess, not emotional the next moment. Morgan adamantly denied there was ever any type of relationship between her and Barry. Adamantly denied there was ever any type of sexual relationship between her and Barry. I think the fact that that is actually noted in the affidavit is because it is reasonable to assume and to ask the question. I'm not saying it's reasonable that there was a relationship. I'm not saying there was a relationship. I'm just saying it's reasonable to imagine that there could have been one. That's all. And so if there wasn't one, then one's got to potentially look elsewhere. Now we go on to the Jeffrey Puckett interview. On May 14, 2020, investigator Richard Wren interviewed Jeff Puckett. Puckett was one of the workers who was supposed to meet Barry Morphew in Broomfield on May 10, 2020 to complete a landscape job. Puckett stated he was contacted by Morgan on Sunday 10th to see if he wanted to go to Denver to work on a job for Barry. After being asked by Morgan, Puckett contacted Barry directly. Puckett had no knowledge of the job until he was contacted by Morgan. On Monday, Puckett and Morgan met up with Cassidy Cordova, who was helping them with the job. So by Monday, there are 3 workers who are kind of involved in this particular job. And now we deal with the Cassidy Cordova interview. On May 14, 2020, so 4 days after Suzanne's disappearance, investigator Richard Wren interviewed Cassidy Cordova. Cordova advised he had contact with Barry Morphew early on the week of May 4th, and Barry mentioned that he may need Cordova to help with a job in Denver next week. Barry said he would get back with Cordova later if he was for sure needed. On May 10th, Cordova had not heard from Barry, so Barry still didn't actually contact Cordova even on May 10th, or I guess prior to that. So he calls Barry at about 1:45 p.m. on May 10th, on Mother's Day, and Barry asked Cordova to help with the job since Cordova was already in Colorado Springs. Cordova met the rest of the crew in Denver on Monday morning. I think it's very interesting that he doesn't ask Cordova to come over then on the Sunday. Barry's there, no, come over, but don't come over today. But Morgan Gentile, you can come over that afternoon. Cordova advised he has known Barry for about 2 years because they worked together at DSI. Cordova advised that Cody Cox had an issue with Barry over Barry firing him. Cox had been working for Barry also. So another thing that comes through in these multiple witness statements is that you kind of get the sense that Barry can be quite, I don't know if the word's aggressive or confrontational or physical or some kind of combination of those, but you kind of get the idea that more than one person has had an argument with Barry, and how can I put it? In other words, Barry's not a Chris Watts personality where everyone gets along with him and no one can think of anything bad to say about him. Barry's quite different to Chris Watts. He's in your face, he's assertive, and he seems to rub quite a few people the wrong way. And that's sort of disclosed here. So on May 14th, 2020, investigator Richard Wren interviewed Cody. Cox worked with Barry and for Barry's landscape business. Cox and Cordova did a landscape job in Broomfield between August of 2019 and December 2019. The general contractor did not like the job and it had to be repaired several times. After the last attempt to fix the wall, Cox refused to go back to Denver to fix the wall. Barry fired Cox. At the same time, Cox was given the ultimatum to leave DSI or be fired because of a hot urinalysis test. I think what that means is that they found possible substances in his urine. I don't know, but if that's true, then you've got possibly two employees working for the same company, if I'm not mistaken, with the same situation going on. Now, I can kind of understand that you can have one employee, it could be a rumor and whatever, and no one's sure, but if there are two, then it starts to seem like birds of a feather stick together, doesn't it? So, and then one's also got to wonder, was there anyone else besides these fired employees? In any event, you can kind of see how that aspect can lead to poor job performance. You're not really focused on your job. You are kind of doing other things. And in a previous live, I said something along the lines of, does Barry sometimes on his way to a job get sidetracked by a deer, right? It's that kind of scenario. Are you not completely focused on your work, and that is leading you to have somewhat poor work performance? And there are various ways that you can not be completely focused on your work, right? Robbie Robbins says, how are your ribs? Better today, and I'm also, as I'm sitting here, I'm in less pain. I actually took far fewer meds today than I took yesterday. But also, I had a very, very bad sleep last night, so I'm hoping for a better one this night. But thanks for the question. Monique Dawn says, we need a televised trial to see these witnesses testify. If this does go to trial, and if it's anything like the Patrick Frazee trial, then I don't think it will be televised, but we'll see. So Cody Cox was given the ultimatum to leave DSI or be fired because of this test. Cody Cox left DSI. Cox advised that this all happened around the end of December 2019. So you can see kind of a little bit of, what can one call it? There's a bit of erratic behavior going on the work front with some of Barry's colleagues in the couple of months prior to Suzanne's disappearance, right? And so what's interesting is Cox was asked about the information that he wanted to, quote unquote, kick Barry's ass. Cox advised that rumor was started by Jeff Puckett. Cox said that he was not happy about getting fired, but was not going around saying he wanted to fight Barry. So there's kind of a fair amount of hearsay and finger pointing here, and then and no one. So someone points a finger at someone else, and then the other person says, "No, that's not true." On and on and on. So it kind of makes you sort of wonder, what is the reality here? Everyone's pointing a finger, but no one's doing anything wrong. Nevertheless, people are being fired. Cox advised he had met Suzanne and talked about how she had brought cookies to his kids. He described Suzanne as a very nice lady. He denied having done anything to Suzanne and denied knowledge of what happened to Suzanne. Cox advised that Barry never talked bad about his relationship with Suzanne. So I guess in a way, the authorities are trying to establish if Cody has a motive. And then it says, during a subsequent interview on May 22nd, 2020, Cox stated he does not recall ever telling Puckett he wanted to beat up Barry. So far we've kind of looked at witnesses that are basically co-workers of Barry Morphew, right? Now we're going to go to a friend of Suzanne Morphew and get a totally different take, not only on Suzanne, but also on Barry. Let's have a look at some of your points here. Pula says something there. Marcus says, if Liebler was a material witness, it's impossible to imagine him not appearing. Monique Dawn says the defense might paint Barry as a saint surrounded by drug users. Okay, so now we go to the second Sheila Oliver interview. Now, one wonders to what extent this is admissible. Anyway, well, let's just go through it. On May 14, 2020, Sheila Oliver was interviewed by FBI agent William Rowell. Sheila said that she first met Suzanne when they were roommates and students together at Purdue University, West Lafayette in Indiana, about 1990. So they'd been friends like 30 years. So, if there's any sort of thought that Sheila's a sort of flaky, here today, gone tomorrow friend, or she doesn't really know Suzanne, I don't know if you could really say that. Suzanne, and based on what she says, you kind of do get the sense that she really does know more than a little about some of the dynamics. Suzanne married Barry in August 1994. Both families have children in the same age ranges. It's Sheila's family and Suzanne's, and have raised their kids closely. About 2 years ago, the Morphew's daughters went to college in Colorado, Western State College in Gunnison. The Morphews then moved to Colorado in 2018. They didn't have their home sold in Indiana before they left, and I've underlined this part and kind of put an exclamation mark next to it. The move seemed to be in a rush. And one wonders what that's all about, because one has the same impression with the Chris Watts case, that they moved to Colorado in a rush as well. And I think Shanann even left the furniture in the house. And I mean, that's not what I'm saying. That's what people who were involved in the sale said, right? So you have a rush to get to Colorado in both cases, and one wonders, if you're rushing to something, that's one thing, but what are you perhaps running away from? What are you leaving? What are you in a rush to leave behind? Especially when you consider the end of the story. And then this is where it gets pretty interesting, and it's why I've used it as the title of the story. Sheila describes Barry as domineering. Now, that is a unusually strong word. She doesn't say he's controlling. Domineering is someone who dominates somebody else, someone who is always telling someone else what to do. It's an unusually strong word if you think about it. It's an unusually strong word to use in terms of marriage. I mean, how many partners do you know that are domineering, that you would describe as domineering? Let's have a look at some of you. Axie says maybe they were running away. Stephanie says, and those are big moves. Karina says, I wonder what the reason for the move was. It is a good question. So one must also wonder, what does domineering mean in practice? Does it mean you domineering in your words? Does it mean that you sort of quote Bible verses to get someone to do what you want? So you ask them and then, well, God would have expected this. And you kind of get quite a lot of Barry, I don't know if it's taking the Lord's name in vain, but it is basically seems to know what, it seems to be suggesting that God has acted in mysterious ways in this case, kind of thing, which seems kind of a strange appropriation of God's place and God's power. I mean, it's like we don't know what happened to Suzanne Morphew, but Barry seems to even assume that he knows what God knows happened in a weird way. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, that's one possible area of the domineering. Another possible area is if you're domineering in a physical sense, where, if you say, well, I'm not going to let you go out wearing that or whatever, or, we are definitely going to have a barbecue tonight, even though we had one yesterday. I don't care what your diet is, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it because I say so, and that's enough of a reason. One just wonders what the domineering actually comes down to. And near the bottom of page 48, she does kind of give some examples. And that does flesh it out, but one wonders how much more it could be fleshed out. So, for example, Sheila says he would tell her she had to change in order for them to get along. So she must change. Suzanne must change in order for them to get along. So if they're arguing, then you must change so that we can get along. You must be flexible. You must. Do you see what that is? Sheila also said that money was a big issue between them, and says that Barry was very controlling with money, and I think that is that's definitely an area where you could potentially tie something together, where you say, how is Barry domineering in practice? What does it actually look like? How does it manifest? What is it practically? And then if you look at being controlling with money, you can see how there's a link between the two. And she doesn't say he was controlling with money. She says he was very controlling with money. And yes, she gives an example. She says he insisted Suzanne use cash, but he would charge hunting equipment on his credit card. And we don't know if that's definitely accurate, but it sounds like it could be. But it's also something that feels kind of like a unique insight based on the intimacy of the knowledge, the intimacy of the relationship between Sheila and Suzanne. I mean, it's an assumption we're making. But in any event, what's recorded here in the affidavit is that Suzanne must use cash, but it's okay if Barry puts hunting equipment, which, let's face it, it's non-essential, on his credit card. And some of that equipment's pretty expensive. The other thing that Barry was doing was he was investing, seems to be quite heavily in the silver market, and then it bottomed out. So you can kind of imagine, I don't know whether you want to say he was gambling, but he was placing, I guess, certain kind of bets on the silver market, and then it didn't pan out. And I seem to remember that Suzanne wrote something about silver in her notes, didn't she? So if this is true, we don't know if it is true. We don't know if it can be proved, but if it is true, it suggests someone that is sort of two-faced. There's one rule for me and one rule for you. You must use cash, and you can only use cash. I'm gonna buy the stuff that I like to have fun with on credit. I'm gonna I'm going to speculate on the silver market. And one also wonders, with whose money did he speculate on the silver market? Where did that money come from? Sheila also says that Suzanne did not stand up for herself, and this is important, until recently, right? And I kind of get the same feeling with the Chris Watts case. Chris Watts did not stand up for himself in his marriage until recently. What happens when you stand up for yourself? Then there's kind of an ugly confrontation that happens, and threats and things. And the rubber hits the road, right? The marriage had become very rocky by 2018. That's according to Sheila. There was hope that a move to Colorado would kind of bring about a new start and would help things. And what is quite interesting from Sheila's perspective is she says there was never a definite reason for, I guess, the girls going to college in Colorado and the family moving there. So it's quite strange. It's like, why are you guys moving to Colorado? And one wonders whether it's got something to do with debts. You know, are you running away from debts, or are you running towards a job? One also wonders whether in the Chris Watts case that may have been a factor as well, bearing in mind they went bankrupt and were about to go bankrupt again. At the time they were about to go bankrupt again, they were going to move again. We do know that often when people have financial problems, not only do you have to move, but sometimes you move in order to avoid accounting for your financial troubles to some extent. It's just interesting that Sheila says there's never a definite reason for the girls going to college in Colorado. Often there is. It's like, we're going there because of that, because they only have that there or whatever. But think about it. It's quite a strange thing. The girls go to Colorado and the family move there as well. Suzanne thought it would be nice for them to live near redacted, though. I guess that means live near their daughters. I seem to remember seeing somewhere or hearing somewhere that Suzanne was more reluctant to leave Indiana because she'd got a lot of friends and relationships there, which almost suggests that did Barry have strong connections with the people around him, Indiana? And if not, why not? And that actually does come up in his witness statements. Suzanne came back to visit Sheila twice from Colorado. Once was Thanksgiving 2018, while the Morphews were still trying to sell their house in Indiana. This is quite interesting, while Suzanne was at Sheila's house, she had stepped away from her cell phone to use the restroom. And Barry tried calling her several times within a few minutes, then tried calling Sheila, then tried calling Darren. He was persistent and obsessive about knowing where she was, at least when she was with Sheila. So, we asked the question, what does being domineering feel like and look like? One way is you could have someone who's constantly calling you, and if they don't get hold of you, they kind of insist on getting hold of you, and they call and call and call and call, right? You know what I'm saying? It's not like one call and I'll wait till you get me back. I will call until you kind of answer, that sort of thing. He was persistent and obsessive about knowing where she was, at least when she was with Sheila. The other time was July 2019, when Suzanne returned to Indiana to visit Sheila, and then went to Michigan to visit her dad. Barry called Sheila saying he couldn't get in touch with Suzanne. So that's another thing, is you phone this person you're trying to get hold of. When you can't get hold of them, you phone all sorts of other people, because you absolutely have to know right then and there where that person is. Suzanne told Sheila this was odd, because Barry never bothered to call Suzanne any other times. He was just very persistent in checking up on Suzanne when she was with Sheila. Now, before I read footnote 54, you can kind of, in a broad, basic way, address this in two ways. The one is, does Barry want to know where Suzanne is because he wants to cheat on her? in other words, I need to know you're at A so that if I'm at B, I don't have to worry about you? Or is it something else? Is it he's got reason to believe she's cheating on him, right? And so anyway, footnote 54 reads, this June 2019 visit to Michigan was consistent with Suzanne meeting Jeff Libler and Barry suspecting she was having an affair, thus his calls to Sheila. So this was really the reason why Barry was making all these calls. He's suspecting Suzanne of having an affair. And guess what? She is. She was. The Oliver's daughter, Hannah, was married. So this is also incredible intel. This on its own is very strong narrative as far as I'm concerned for the prosecution. So if you're going to say, if your story is that Suzanne decided she's going to just walk out of her marriage, right? Then this narrative alone is going to really stand up to that quite strongly. Let's just be clear on where it is. It's page 49 of the affidavit. And it's dealing with Sheila Oliver's statement, dealing with her daughter. Sheila Oliver's daughter, Hannah, was getting married on Sunday, May 10th, 2020. Guess what? That's the day, that was Mother's Day. That was the day that Suzanne disappeared. Now, one wonders, did Barry know that? Was Barry aware of that? Was Barry and Suzanne, I know they were married. I know they lived in the same house. But were they that familiar with one another and that fond of one another and that conversational with one another that Barry was conversant, was aware of that detail that, guess what, is my best friend's daughter's wedding, Sunday, May 10th, 2020, right? You kind of have a similar situation with Chris Watts and Shanann Watts. Did Chris Watts anticipate the level of intimacy and closeness that Shanann had with some of her friends like Nicole Atkinson, where they knew about her doctor's appointment and they knew this and that? And of course, if he's not very close with his wife because he's cheating on her, and if he's not very close to her because his thoughts are elsewhere, then obviously he's not going to be aware of some of those little intricate dynamics which are going to come back and haunt you in terms of a crime scenario. And so in terms of this, the wedding was originally going to include many people and Suzanne was going to attend. This is almost like the gender reveal. It's kind of this event that was going to happen and then why did you disappear? So the wedding was originally going to include many people and Suzanne was going to attend, but due to COVID-19 restrictions, it was limited to immediate family and was live streamed online. Suzanne was going to watch it. She would not have missed it for the world. That's according to Sheila. On Saturday, May 9th, 2020, Sheila sent 2 snaps to Suzanne in the morning, which were opened. Very important. Later in the same day, it's written here, late in the day / evening, Sheila sent 3 more snaps to Suzanne, I guess of her daughter, which were never opened or received, and that's reflected on Sheila's cell phone. So you don't even need to have Suzanne's phone to know that Suzanne's phone never opened or received those messages on that day. And that is giving you sort of incontrovertible proof that something happened to Suzanne on May 9th. I don't think that's really a matter of conjecture anymore. I think it's quite clear that that's the case. Sheila said that there's a 0% chance that Suzanne would run off and not at least tell one of her daughters or Sheila. If she had left Barry, she would have contacted one of her daughters or Sheila to let them know what was going on. Suzanne would not commit suicide. Her religious beliefs would not allow her to do this. I also think, in the scenario where she's having an affair and she's thinking of a new life, it's the opposite to suicide. It's you are wanting to have life, have a new life. You don't, if she decided, I can't get divorced, but I can't be in this marriage, that would possibly bring about suicidal thoughts, right? But in a scenario where you are thinking of a new life and you're in love with someone and you mountain biking and all these things, you are living life, you're embracing life, aren't you? Also, she'd beaten cancer. She'd beaten cancer twice. This was a moment to grab life, to grab, to come into her own again. And she was at last standing up for herself, right? Part of standing up for yourself is stepping out into the world and being alive, kind of thing. I just want to look at these comments. Gathering places here, good to see you. Thanks for that, Zenaida. Pauline says she wouldn't have left without her phone either. That's a good point. Who does that? Who leaves for a long period without their phone, without their money, without their car? Robbie Robbins is completely out of character. Zenaida says, I love it when you compare other crime cases. I think it's very important, but when I initially did that in my early days of writing books, people hated it. They said, can you please stick to this case? This is the Jodi Arias case. Please we don't hear about Oscar and we don't hear about this. And even my co-author said, you know what, some people don't think that in that particular case, that person is this or that. And I've always just felt one's got to use that the thread of the truth, certainly the truth as you recognize it, and build on that golden thread with other cases to get that sense of a pattern. It's really important. And if you're going to lose some people along the way, that's sort of the cost of being authentic, I guess, an authentic voice in true crime. So this is also really important and really interesting. Sheila said Suzanne suspected Barry had an extramarital affair based on Barry's behavior. So even Sheila's kind of, what's the word? Not playing off. She's kind of getting, she's queuing off, Sheila's queuing off Suzanne's suspicions. So Suzanne has suspicions and Sheila's thinking, seems like Sheila's thinking that makes sense. Or Sheila's kind of understanding where Suzanne's coming from in her concerns, because she's saying Barry's behavior just seems strange. And so this is the behavior that they talk about. Barry kept turning his phone off at times. Now, you can take some of this, you can either say she's so loyal to a friend that she's kind of got blinders on, she's biased. You could say that. But you could also say that if there's some merit in Barry's, in these observations of Barry's behavior, when he's doing something that he's not supposed to do, can one apply it to Barry's behavior within the fabric of the actual crime scene, right? And so he has this thing about he turns his phone off at times. So at certain times his phone's just off. Okay, wow, what's going on there? Also, not being where he said he would be. Always secretive and not honest with Suzanne. So these are Suzanne's reasons that she suspected an extramarital affair. He's turning his phone off. He's not where he said he would be. He's always secretive and he's not honest. Then he had to travel back to Hamilton County, Indiana for some type of legal proceeding at least once, but maybe more. So Suzanne was even aware of there's some kind of legal thing that Barry had to address or answer to that he wouldn't even, seems like he wouldn't even tell her about. Then it says here, Suzanne had given up asking him Suzanne had given up asking him why because he wouldn't tell her. So Suzanne was asking him, what's this legal proceeding? Why must you go to Hamilton County? And he simply wouldn't tell her. Is there a precedent to that? You keep asking Barry, what's this about? Is he going to tell you? He won't tell his own wife about something. Well, will he tell other people? In the Chris Watts case, he couldn't admit his affair to Shanann. What do you think he's going to admit freely in an open way to the authorities? I mean, we know how that played out. Then it goes on, this is the final paragraph dealing with Sheila Oliver. As Suzanne's suspicions were aroused over the last few years, she wanted to find out what her husband was up to. So it wasn't just that Suzanne was suspicious. She was like, I want to find out actually what's going on here. In other words, in a way, she's kind of using critical thinking. She wants a scientific answer. She doesn't want to be like, maybe this, maybe that, having this vague sense of reality. She wants to have an absolute sense of reality. She's kind of investigating her husband. She wants an answer. She wants a straight answer. And so she doesn't just accept what he says. She takes some measures to find the truth. And so it's actually her idea to buy a spy pen to find out what he's doing. But she's afraid of Barry's reaction if he finds out. She's afraid if Barry finds out that he's spying on her. So in the end, Suzanne asked Sheila to buy the spy pen for her on the internet, and somehow they're going to make an exchange. So I think one's got to also ask what that's about. How was Suzanne afraid that Barry would find out? Would Barry find out by looking on her phone? Would Barry find out by having some kind of access to her computer or computer records? So one gets the sense that she was aware of Barry's hypervigilance and incredible surveillance. And so she's trying to circumvent that by having somebody else purchase it. So it's not going to come up on credit card records or whatever, right? So she's trying to dodge the digital trail. And I guess you could argue that she did that successfully, right? So Sheila buys the spy pen, gives it to her, and it says Sheila did this and gave the pen to Suzanne while they were on vacation together in Florida a few months ago, around February 2020. So obviously things had escalated to a point, and by the time Suzanne wanted the spy pen, it was February 2020. Well, Suzanne would be dead, likely deceased, 2 months after that, 2 months after buying the spy pen. And so you can actually see in a way why the relationship deteriorated quite quickly, and also why she stood up for herself quite suddenly, is because she probably got to understand what was going on with Barry quite quickly, quite effectively in a short space of time. Do you agree with that? Patricia says the spy pen was to help Suzanne to leave the marriage. That's a good point as well. That's a good point. Mel Max says, I think Suzanne was waiting for the youngest daughter to get onto school. That's also true. Okay, so now we go into the next interview. This is with George Davis. This is also really interesting because this is now not a friend of Suzanne, it's a friend of Barry's. And what do you think he's going to say? So on May 15th, so I think just one day after speaking to Sheila, CBI agents Graham and Cale interviewed George Davis, who said that he'd known Barry for about a year and a half. George stated he has not noticed any. By the way, George, I think, is referenced by Barry in one of his interviews where he says, all I want to do now is hunt with George. I think this is the George he's referring to. So George says he hasn't noticed any recent changes in Barry's behavior. That's quite an interesting point to make. I'm not sure whether the Lindstroms really noticed any change in Chris Waters' behavior, but not everyone's an investigator. Not everyone's really looking for that. Sometimes friendships only explore a certain dimension of behavior. You're going to gym and hunting or whatever. And as Stephanie says, he only knew Barry a year and a half. There's another guy who knew Barry 20 years. We'll get to him. Anyway, George said that he hadn't noticed any recent changes. George explained that he and Barry work out together. They train together, usually 5 days a week. Once the COVID-19 restrictions closed the gym, they began working out at George's residence. I've always said, I wonder how COVID is going to affect true crime. And one of the ways that it can do that is it starts to separate what would have been communities of guys and women and men and women into smaller groups, and that may lead to certain kind of fragmented relationships and fragmented thinking. Anyway, so they start working out at George's residence. George explains that Barry typically comes home, I think that should be, comes over to work out sometime between 5 and 7. So it seems like Barry has a long day working, and then instead of going home, he goes to George's house and he works out there from 5 until 7, and then he goes home. George said he and Barry hunt together and work at the same fire station. George stated he last physically saw Barry either Thursday or Friday when they worked out at his house. George explained since he works 1 week on, 1 off, he believed they may have worked out early around 4 p.m. George stated that Barry has never confided in him about any type of marital problems. George said that Barry loves his children and his relationship with Suzanne seemed normal. George explained he and his wife, Lindsay Davis, have gone on several dates with Barry and Suzanne. George stated on Sunday, May 10, 2020, he was at his residence when he received a phone call from Tim Nelson, who informed him a bike was located over an embankment by Barry's house. George stated he turned on his fire radio and called Barry. Barry stated he was just outside Buena Vista on his way back. George believed he called Barry between 5:30 and 6 p.m. George stated that he responded to the area where Suzanne's bike was found. When he arrived, he noted the bike had been moved onto the road near Sheriff's vehicle. So you kind of get the idea here that George is sort of on Barry's side. It's like, Barry, guess what? Someone's moved your wife's bicycle. It should have been left there, kind of thing. While still at the scene of the bike, George stated Barry arrived in his black Ford F-350. Barry was wearing jeans and possibly a red-orange flannel shirt. George had conversations with CBI and the FBI about his observations and conclusions that an abduction had taken place with a staged scene. So it's quite interesting that Barry's friend also thinks that the bicycle thing is staged, and I think it was staged, and he thinks it's an abduction. It's not a mountain lion, unless you say a mountain lion abducted her, but he's saying that it's an abduction, right? In just a very basic way, I think it's interesting that Barry's friend arrives at the scene even before Barry does. I just find that quite interesting. So now we go to the second interview with Morgan Gentile. This is May 15th. On May 15th, 2020, CBI agents Cahill and Kobach, that's Kevin Kobach who interviewed Nicole Kessinger. Remember, this is Colorado Bureau of Investigation agents. They contacted Morgan Gentile at her residence in Salida. Morgan spoke about conversations that George Davis had with her, in which George might be attempting to influence her future testimony. So what's quite interesting is she's coming forward, or she's talking about discussions where she feels that Barry's friend George might be trying to influence her, right? Morgan said that she recalled some additional detail about the hotel room in Broomfield. Morgan explained that after she and Jeff Puckett checked in, they went to their rooms. Jeff went to room number 225. 225 was the one originally rented and used by Barry, while she went to room number 228. Morgan explained that Jeff could not figure out how to open his hotel room door, so she opened it. Morgan explained that when she opened the door, now this is quite important, Morgan's room is a different room, but Morgan happens to go into the room Barry used because Jeff couldn't get in. As a result, Morgan is kind of a witness to the interior of Barry's room, and what she says is, when she opened the door, she immediately smelled the strong odor of chlorine. Not that she thought that she smelled chlorine, but that she immediately smelled a strong odor of chlorine. Morgan said that this wasn't ordinary house cleaning odor. It was more consistent with what you'd smell with a pool. And what is really interesting is, so you have this interview from Morgan, and you might think this or that about that, but when she mentions it again, she gives a little bit more detail. She kind of just colors in exactly how potent this smell was, and we'll get to that in a few moments. Morgan stated that she observed several damp and used towels on the floor. Later, Morgan stated that Jeff found an insurance document under the pillow. The document was thrown in the trash. She could not recall what was on the document. Now, if you go through Barry's statements with a fine-tooth comb, he just said he took documents there that had to do with the job. But this is something else. It's an insurance document. It's unfortunate they didn't look at what was on the document, but they certainly looked at it enough to know, number one, that it was insurance, and number two, that it probably wasn't related to the job. One wonders whether they recovered that document. When questioned about the job sites on Saturday, and here I've got a huge yellow exclamation mark alongside this paragraph. When questioned about the job site on Saturday, May 9, 2020, Morgan stated she recalled an odd comment made by Barry. Morgan explained after they completed the beach at the River House that 6962 is that 105 Salida. I'm not quite sure what CR stands for. Is it corner? Anyway, she rode with Barry to the next site. Morgan stated she commented that, so she said pigs could eat an entire human body in 2 hours. So one wonders where that statement came up from. And then Barry said he would be able to bury a body and it would never be found. Barry said he would be able to bury a body and it would never be found. So let me ask you a question. In your life, have you ever said that? Have you ever said, you know what, I think I could bury a body and no one would ever find it? Have you ever said that? Let's do a quick poll. Have you ever said in your life, guess what, I think I could bury a body and no one would ever find it? So let's have a look. Gathering Place says never. Stephanie says never. Monique Dawn says no, nope. Robbie Robbins says no. Thought Criminal, nope. Michelle Kirby, no. No, never. Of course not. There's not a single yes here. I don't think I've ever said it. I've buried a couple of animals like birds, trying to think what else. But I mean, I don't know why you would ever say and it would never be found. Why would you want to bury a body and it would never be found? The other thing that I think is really pertinent here is, so first of all, it's a very odd thing to say by anybody. The other thing is that it's said the day that Suzanne disappears and she's never found. I can't really stress that more than, I don't think you can overstress that. Nobody says, or very, very few people would say, guess what, I can bury a body and no one will ever find it. And then on that exact same day, Suzanne disappears and her remains are never ever found. The other thing that I think is very interesting intertextually is Patrick Frazee said exactly the same thing. Patrick Frazee was a rancher, and I think he bragged to his neighbor that, or he said something along the lines of that he could make a body disappear. And he seemed to have this belief, which Barry, I think, also seemed to have, which is no body, no crime. Now, I think if you've been watching too many true crime documentaries, you might watch one where that is emphasized in a certain way, and you might think, wow, this is the secret, this is the holy grail to committing the perfect murder, no body, no crime. Except it's not. And the Patrick Frazee case is an example of that, and I would wager that the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew, if remains are never ever found, I would wager that you will nevertheless, there will be, well, someone has been charged with a crime. So no body in Suzanne Morphew's case / crime, you could say question mark, right? But I think not only is the statement itself hugely significant, it's also the timing of it. The timing of it is hugely significant. It also makes you wonder, what the hell were they talking about for Morgan to say, guess what, pigs can eat an entire human body in 2 hours? Like, she's not saying the body of a dog or something, it's a human body. So I don't know whether she'd been watching one of those movies like Silence of the Lambs, the follow-up to that, I think it's called Hannibal. I don't know if she's watching that, but pretty gruesome conversations they're having. Then the affidavit says we spoke with Morgan about Barry's financial activities. Morgan said that Barry contacted his stock trader, Dan, and he spoke to Dan on a daily basis. Remember, he was speculating with silver, and apparently the silver market bottomed out. You kind of get the idea that Barry is very actively trying to make money on the side of his regular jobs, right? And that brings us to the third interview with Morgan Gentile. So whatever you think about Morgan Gentile, the authorities felt it necessary to go back to her again and again and again. So this one is conducted July 29th. So effectively 2.5 months after the disappearance. On July 29, 2020, Morgan Gentile provided a handwritten timeline to Chaffee County Sheriff's Office Sheriff John Schmitz. The following lines were noted by Special Agent Grissing for the affidavit. For Sunday, May 10th, Morgan wrote that she heard Barry's truck at 5 a.m. Anything wrong with that? Let's see, who have you been paying attention? So Morgan says in this timeline that she heard Barry's truck at 5 o'clock. Monique Dawn says he said he woke up at 5. Mel Stiller says too early. Okay, but don't you remember that she said she first heard him at 4 o'clock? Do you remember that her first in her first statement, she said she heard the unique sound of his truck at 4 o'clock. Well, now she's saying 5 o'clock. Stephanie says that's when he was looking for elk. Timelines don't match. So anyway, I've just circled that here. She added, at 11:15, Barry called and he was out of breath, panting but fatigued, kind of like hungover, but he doesn't drink. Honestly, when I hung up, I thought to myself, he sounded like he had the worst night of his life. So that's quoted verbatim. Morgan provided more details about her trip to the Broomfield Hotel to include her route on May 10th. She wrote, arrived at hotel 10 to 10:30, grabbed Barry's tools, went to get in. So if you look at this timeline, she arrives at the hotel at kind of the same time Barry does in the morning. Weren't they supposed to meet in the evening of May 10th? So it seems like Suzanne disappears either very early on Mother's Day or very early Sunday morning, or she disappears or dies Saturday night or Saturday afternoon. According to Morgan's own timeline, she then meets Barry at a hotel on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. The one thing that I find a bit strange with that is there doesn't seem to be any footage of her at the hotel. We've seen CCTV of Barry. I wonder why we haven't seen any of Morgan. That doesn't mean she wasn't there, but one just wonders what that's all about. In any event, this is kind of highlighted by Special Agent Grussing. This, whether you want to call it an inconsistency or an acknowledgement or a whatever's in the timeline, that's sort of mentioned there. Monique Dawn says Barry was supposed to pick her up Sunday morning. Why so early for a Monday job? He was actually supposed to pick her up, if my memory serves me, at 5:30 on the Sunday. And now she's saying she arrived at the hotel at 10:30. I thought he was going to pick her up to bring her to the hotel, unless I misunderstood. Anyway, going further, this is what I mean by this detail now really fleshes out this idea of how strong the chlorine smell was. Morgan wrote that she and Puckett checked in rooms 228 and 225. When Morgan walked in 225, quote, the smell of chlorine was so strong it made my eyes water. I noticed wet towels on the ground in the bathroom and Barry made the bed. So I think those two things together, number one, that this chlorine smell actually made her eyes water, is giving you a sense of just the potency of the chemicals that were in that room. And then the other thing is Barry's made the bed. Does Barry seem to be the kind of guy who makes a bed? I mean, if you look at the inside of his truck, does Barry seem like the kind of guy who makes a bed? For Monday, May 11th, Morgan wrote that they drove to the job site from the hotel. She indicated it looked like Barry had removed top caps. That was it. We also did not have the tools we needed, like a packer or gravel. So after all that effort, all the effort to go early to the job site, like a day early, and to take the tools Barry seems to kind of wake up early on Sunday morning. They don't even have the right tools. She says, we did not have the tools we needed. Now we go to an interview with John Schmitz. On May 16, 2020, CBI agent Gonzalez contacted John Schmitz regarding a message he had left on the Suzanne Morphew tip line. Schmitz stated that he first met Barry in or about December of 2017 when they were working on the same construction project in Indianapolis. He said that Schmitz, is a contractor and Barry was the landscaper assigned to the Main Street Shops project. Schmitz stated that at some point during an altercation with Barry body bumped him, which prompted Schmitz to grab him in a headlock and pin him against a wall. He said that what he recalls the most during that altercation was the evil in Barry's eyes. Schmitz said that when he heard about Suzanne, he just had a feeling that it was not good, knowing what he does about Barry. So again, we don't know whether this is absolutely true, but if it is, you get a sense of Barry not being a wallflower type of person. In this case, if it's true, apparently Barry body bumps this guy, and my impression is that Schmitz, but maybe it's because Schmitz is telling the story, Schmitz seems to win the physical battle, because he says he grabbed Barry in a headlock and pinned him against the wall. Anyway, we don't really know what the full altercation was or the full story, but it's also not necessarily a case that one of them is good and the other one is bad. Both of them were charged with disorderly conduct. That's according to Schmitz. He said that in May of 2018, Barry was charged with disorderly conduct by the Boone County Sheriff's Office for the incident that occurred in December of 2017. So if that's true, there should be a record of that. He said that the case had been continued until February of 2019, when all charges were dropped. Now we go to the Brad Oswald interview. And to me, this is such a strong statement that I've just put a kind of a square around it, because this really stands out to me. This really stands out as a strong witness statement. I don't know if I'm going to go that much further beyond this. It's past 11 o'clock at night where I am. I am quite tired, but I think this is a very important witness statement to share with you guys. Okay, so his name is Brad Oswald. He's also interviewed by CBI agent Kevin Kobach, and that takes place on May 17th, 2020, about a week after Suzanne's disappearance. So CBI agent Kobach interviewed Brad Oswald, an Indiana resident and deputy sheriff in Hamilton County. That's quite interesting. So Brad is also a deputy sheriff. Oswald stated that he had known Barry 20 years and they are good friends. Oswald came to Barry's house in 2019 to hunt in a preserve south of Salida. Oswald knew that Barry got into a fight with another guy in Indiana over the other party not wanting to move scaffolding on a construction site. Oswald described Barry as hard-headed and strong-willed. So I think when you have a deputy sheriff describing Barry as, and he's known him for 20 years, as hard-headed and strong-willed, I think that is quite a credible description. I also think that description matches the sense you get from Barry himself, the way that Barry presents himself. Barry seems to present himself as a strong-willed character, as a tough guy, also as a hard-headed guy, as a guy who is stubborn and masculine. I don't know if those are manly traits, but certainly that was, his trait. You kind of get the sense that Barry didn't want to get divorced. Why? Because he's hard-headed in a way. Kerry Heflin, thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. He added that, so the deputy sheriff, this is Brad Oswald, added that he was afraid to say what I think. So this is a quote. He said, "I'm afraid to say what I think, but I think Barry was so pissed off he accidentally killed her." So this guy who's known Barry 20 years says, "I'm actually afraid to say this. But this is what I think. I think Barry was so pissed off, so angry." What do you think made him angry? And then he says he accidentally killed her. Now, the accidental part could be, well, it could be, I guess, a lot of different things. But, you know, if the tranquilizer gun was used, and maybe the idea wasn't permanent damage, maybe the dose administered ended up being an overdose and was accidental. In any event, it's this individual's theory that Barry may have killed her, but it was accidental. And he goes on to say, Oswald guessed that Barry and Suzanne were fighting, or she confronted him, and that caused him to lose his temper. Oswald said that Barry had all night to plan how to get rid of her. So here you've kind of got a deputy sheriff, someone who knows a bit about crime, someone who knows about Barry, and knows Barry firsthand, has hunted with Barry, and knows that Barry has a certain kind of temperament, and so he's got his opinion. And so he also says Barry was big time controlling over Suzanne. So if you have Sheila saying that Barry was domineering, and then also Barry was very controlling with money, you say, yeah, but that's just Sheila. Sheila's biased. Sheila's Suzanne's friend. Sheila's going to say things to support her friend. Well, now you've got Barry's friend saying Barry was big time controlling. Now, doesn't big time controlling sound like domineering? Then Oswald says that Barry is very secretive. Isn't that also what Sheila said, that Barry's very secretive? And he would not talk to anyone if he did do something. Barry is an excellent skid load operator and can do incredible things with a skid loader. Oswald said that Barry could have easily buried Suzanne, and that Barry is smart enough to turn off his phone or leave it at home. Oswald stated that Barry is never wrong. I think what that kind of means is, I guess it means Barry's always right. And he added that Barry is very prideful. I guess that kind of means, like, in terms of, how can I put it? He's sort of the man of the house, and he can't do anything wrong, kind of thing. Anyway, he says Barry's very prideful and he would never confess to killing Suzanne. Oswald believes that Barry would have taken her away from the house if he killed her, because she would be too easy to find on the property. As you can see, quite a lot of big, serious statements in that one interview with this guy who knew him really, really well, or knew him for 20 years. Let's just look at some of your statements. Thanks a lot, Gigi Jardine. Thanks a lot for that. Someone says that Suzanne was Barry's cash cow. Pauline says something caused Barry to lose control. Mel Stiller says Barry was raised as the king of the family. Yeah, I think that's true. The king, the patriarch, the hero. Patricia Burns says none of this is new to me. Sorry that we're not educating you in any way. Max says, I wonder what size of life insurance policy there was. Okay. Stephanie, that is exactly it. The golden boy. That's really the situation. Chris Watts was also the golden boy in his little microcosm. And now we go to the Kurt Sigler interview, also conducted by Kevin Kobach. On May 17th, 2020, CBI agent Kevin Kobach interviewed Kurt Sigler, who explained that he has known Barry since Kurt was 8 or 9 years old. Kurt stayed with Barry and Suzanne approximately 2 years ago in Colorado. During that stay, Suzanne told Kurt that Barry was cheating on her with a girl. That's quite interesting, is that while this dude was staying with the couple, with Barry and Suzanne, Suzanne tells this guy, Barry's cheating on me. And this was in Colorado. And anyway, Suzanne told Kurt that Barry was cheating on her with a girl from Indiana. Kurt hunted with Barry near Buena Vista that year, that's 2018. On May 11th, 2020, Marcy, Barry's sister, called Kurt and told him that Suzanne was missing, that Suzanne was riding a bike and a mountain lion got her. The next day, Kurt was in Colorado talking to Barry. Kurt stated that Suzanne is not suicidal. She would not do that to the girls or Barry. During the interview, Kurt made assertions that he did not think Barry was capable of killing Suzanne. This is what's really interesting. So Kurt is kind of, well, it seems like Kurt is Barry's pal, and Kurt is aware from Suzanne that she thinks that he's cheating on her. I think I'm going to have to wrap this up. I just sort of feel I shouldn't talk for too much longer. Anyway, so, and then you have the same guy actually seeming to have a change of heart in the middle of the interview with Kobach. So it says here, during the interview, Kurt made assertions that he did not think Barry was capable of killing Suzanne. After speaking with Kurt on audio recording, Agent Kobach walked out the parking lot with him. Kurt turned and he said, I think he killed her. So it's not audio recorded. It's out in the parking lot and he says, I think he killed her. What does that mean? It means Kurt says, I think Barry killed Suzanne. Kurt further stated that Barry's timeline doesn't make sense. The bike was thrown down the embankment. The stuff found along the road was placed and it was like thrown out when Barry was driving back. Curtis also said if anyone found out about Barry's infidelity, they would all turn on him. And then final point, Barry also burnt many bridges in Indiana, referring to business deals. So if this is true, and this is kind of seems to have been said off the record, so one wonders if this does go to trial, and this guy's put on the stand, is he going to deny that he said this? Is it going to be Agent Kevin Kobach's word against his, or is he going to say no, it is true? But certainly, if it is true, Barry burning many bridges in Indiana in terms of business deals, that can explain why I wanted to go to Colorado in a hurry. The other thing is this guy seems to accept, acknowledge, believe in Barry's infidelity as well. So this isn't a case where you only have Suzanne thinking that Barry's unfaithful. You've got quite a few people thinking that, and people who know Barry as well, people who've been Barry's friend as well. Okay, now we go to the Gene Moorman interview. And Gene Moorman, of course, is Suzanne's father. On May 18th, 2020, Gene Moorman, Suzanne's father, was interviewed in Mears, Michigan by FBI agent Lynn Novak. Moorman said that the first time he heard from Barry following Suzanne's disappearance was on Saturday, May 16th, 2020. So this interview was conducted just 2 days after that. But, I mean, just look at that, 6 days passed, 6 days passed before Barry actually told Suzanne's father what had happened. Barry called him and sounded distraught. Sounds like the same thing. You hear Barry sounding very emotional. saying that he felt so badly and the authorities were trying to pin Suzanne's death on him. Sounds like Barry's kind of playing the victim there. Barry said that he was interrogated for 5 hours. Moorman said that he did not find it odd that Barry waited almost a week after Suzanne's disappearance because Barry was very emotional and going through a lot. So you kind of have Gene Moorman seemingly taking Barry's side here, saying, even after a week, Barry was still very emotional. But Barry didn't seem to be too emotional to go to work on the Monday after his wife disappeared. He seemed to be on the job site then. I also don't think you can be totally overcome with emotion like day after day after day after day after day. I mean, the day that something happens, yes. The next day, yes. 3 days afterwards, I don't know. It's also not like Suzanne was found butchered and bleeding or anything. She just disappeared. So why are you being so emotional? You know what I mean? If someone disappears, it's more. It's you can decide how emotional you want to be. When something happens to someone that is absolutely incontrovertible and you see it, then it's traumatic, but that's totally different. So Barry seems to be very emotional here. Anyway, that is Gene's. Gene seems to be quite a kind guy, quite a forgiving guy. Maybe he was a little bit gullible in this respect, and maybe that's how he knew Barry, to be a very emotional man. But what I find quite good here is, on the one hand, Gene is quite forgiving and quite reasonable. I don't know if that's the right word, but he's quite what's the right word for it? He's gracious in terms of how long it took Barry to call him. But then he does say he found it odd that neither of his granddaughters or Barry were home on Mother's Day. So remember, it's Suzanne's father is thinking, it's quite strange that absolutely nobody was home on Mother's Day. And of course, the mother in question is his daughter. His daughters are gone, her husband's gone. Where were they on Mother's Day? How did that happen? And then he goes on to say Barry seldom worked on a Sunday, and you would think that Suzanne's father would know a little bit about Barry, and Barry presents himself as a very religious guy, a very God-fearing guy. And so it makes sense that he wouldn't work on a Sunday. So anyway, it says Barry seldom worked on a Sunday, and it was unusual that he would choose to work on the Sunday of Mother's Day. He said he found that odd. Suzanne never told Moorman that she and Barry were having marital problems. I found that quite interesting. It seems like where we are today, we are not necessarily that in touch with our own parents about things that are deeply personal to us. So, some of us. One wonders where that comes from. Is it pride? Is it parents that are out of touch? Is it children that are out of touch with their parents? Or are we just shallower families? What is going on? Thanks a lot for that, Fractured Fairy Tales. Thanks a lot for that. Then Moorman, so Gene Moorman believed that Suzanne confided in her older sister, Melinda, who lived in Tennessee. That is true. And of course, Melinda deleted that last text that her sister sent to her. Barry and Suzanne went through stressful times when they had a hard time selling their home in Indiana and struggled to pay for their mortgages in Indiana and Colorado. So it didn't really matter where they were struggling to pay their mortgages. A little over a year ago, Moorman loaned Barry and Suzanne $100,000. I think what's quite important to stress here is the $100,000 is coming from Suzanne's father, not from Barry's father or mother. The $100,000 that Barry and Suzanne are getting are coming from Suzanne's side of the family. It says here, Barry paid Moorman back with a personal check on a quarterly basis and paid off the loan early, approximately 3 months ago. So the whole 3 months ago thing could be due to Suzanne putting pressure on him. You know, that I want you to have paid off the debt to my dad, your share of the debt to my dad or whatever, the debt to my dad, so that when I get divorced or when we get divorced, you're not going to hold out on that or we're not going to contest that. I don't want my dad to get caught up in this. Doesn't that make sense? That she wants that aspect certainly to be off the table. If that is the case, that Barry paid the loan off early, and one can almost speculate, did Barry have less money than he normally did have, right? The last time Moorman saw Suzanne was approximately 2 years ago. That's quite a long time. I think what that also shows is, didn't Barry know or assume or have a sense that Suzanne wasn't really that close to her family? So number one, Barry was domineering and controlling, including of the finances, but there was also a sense that he could control her even more because she was quite isolated, because she didn't have extremely close family relationships. But that's not to say she didn't have any close relationships. I think she had close relationships with Sheila and certainly with her daughters and perhaps some other friends as well. But you kind of had a similar thing with Kelsey Bereth, in this place of you don't have these super, super close relationships. A spouse can sometimes feel like I can manipulate the situation. You know, if you don't hear from your child that often, well, then it's going to be quite easy to spin a little tale. One could even argue that that was somewhat relevant in the Chris Watts case, if you think about it. So anyway, it says the last time Moorman saw Suzanne was approximately 2 years ago. She met him in Florida for a vacation. I think that was kind of also used as a pretext to see Jeff Libler. Suzanne was by herself and was supposed to stay with Moorman for 7 days, for a week. She was supposed to see her dad for a week, but abruptly left after 3 days to meet her husband on the West Coast. It's quite sad that the last time she sees her dad, she interrupts the meeting with him and leaves early, and he was upset, but he didn't tell her how he feels. And I think that in a way, I kind of get a sense that that's a little bit of a mirror to Suzanne herself, that she might be very hurt by something, but she might not necessarily say anything, just to preserve good feeling, just to not be confrontational. And then sadly, Jean Moorman passed away on November 10, 2020. And now we're going to deal with Andy Moorman, and I think that is as far as we're going to take it. Andy is Suzanne's brother. Let's just look at some of your comments. Thanks a lot, Debbie McClellan. Debbie says, thanks for your hard work researching this case, even while injured. Take care. Thanks a lot for that, Debbie. I must say, working and also socializing a little bit helps me not be conscious of the pain I'm in. I spent an afternoon, when was it? Recently by myself, and I've just was not a very happy camper. But when I was with some of my family last night, and my girlfriend and my sister was there, I kind of just completely forgot about the injury. It was quite a nice feeling. I think a couple of gin and tonics also helped. Working also helps, definitely. Stephanie says, glad we can help distract. See, distraction is not always a bad thing. It's a red flag in true crime. Wow, Gathering Place, thank you so much. Please rest and heal well. Thanks so much, Gathering Place. Well, that's based on today and yesterday, that's significant. Really appreciate it. I seem to be being invited to more and more get-togethers, but I sort of feel like I need to stay quiet a little bit, just, you can work quietly, but I don't want to be sort of getting in and out of vehicles and all that kind of thing. Stephanie says to Gathering Place, thank you again, heart. Okay, Mel Stiller, I know exactly what you mean. Having a quiet project seems to help deal with the pain of fractured ribs. Okay, so let's finish off with Andrew Moorman. And so this is kind of part one. We'll continue with the witness statements, but we'll stop with Andrew Moorman. And Andrew was a significant, I don't even want to say player, an important person in the fight for justice for Suzanne. We saw his efforts. We heard him come forward. So he was really an important person fighting for Suzanne's voice to be heard and for her to be found. It says here, on May 18, 2020, CBI agent Kobach interviewed Andrew Moorman, brother of Suzanne. Andrew stated that in Indiana a few years ago, Suzanne found a female's bracelet in Barry's truck and confronted him about having an affair. That's pretty big, right? That's pretty specific and pretty big. And this is, she says, a few years ago, right? Barry's sister, Marcy, ended up claiming the bracelet belonged to her. Barry, so that's kind of how that was dealt with. Oh, that's my bracelet. Now, I suppose it could have been Marcy's bracelet, but if it wasn't Marcy's bracelet, you already have a scenario here. So this is what I'm trying to say. It could have been Marcy's bracelet, and if it was Marcy's bracelet, great. But if it wasn't Marcy's bracelet and Marcy was saying, that's my bracelet, you kind of have a precedent, you have a scenario where a family member is covering up for another family member, and that family member who's having things covered up for them knows it. They know they can rely on that being the case, right? So Barry's sister Marcy ended up claiming the bracelet belonged to her. Barry, then it jumps to Barry has exceptional hunting skills. Barry told Andrew that his surveillance system at his home has been down for months. Andrew made the statement, don't get between Barry and his money. Following Suzanne's disappearance, Barry told Andrew that Suzanne crashed her bike or was forced off the road. Barry also said he thought a mountain lion dragged her off. Barry used the mountain lion idea for 2 to 3 days before the theory changed to someone taking Suzanne. Then Barry could not get past the idea that Suzanne was being molested. Andrew said that Barry is a very good skid loader operator and he could have placed her in a tarp and put her anywhere on his way to Denver. Barry knows how to cover scent by using skunk spray and is an exceptional hunter. Andrew did not know Suzanne to have ever been an early riser. That's quite an interesting point. Andrew did not know Suzanne to have ever been an early riser. Okay, I think that is it. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. I'd like to go through more witnesses, but I think I need to call it a day here. Timmy certainly wants to. Hey, Timmy. Debbie McClellan, Suzanne's money was his money as long as they were married. That's true. Stephanie says, thank you so much. Stephanie and I are probably going to be back on Sunday, probably around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, somewhere around there. We're going to talk about Van Gogh, been a while since we've actually spoken about him, but we're going to continue with the series that we've been talking about. So look out for that. There's still quite a lot to deal with in this affidavit. There is metadata in terms of the truck. There is more witnesses. There is quite a lot of evidence still to go through. I think I'm missing some other things, possibly maps and so on. There's also the twist in the tale right at the end of the affidavit that I think, we keep speculating, was the infidelity, was there another woman? Well, there's a twist right at the end of the tale of the affidavit, which I don't think law enforcement put that in there for nothing. Let's just go through your comments. Not there yet says, thank you, good stream. Debbie says, thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed the joke. Robbie Robbins said, I may be late joining on Sunday. Well, we hope to see you. Bria Lace, thank you for being here as an aider. Sharon Butler says, oh, that's interesting, covering sense. Yeah, that is quite interesting. Karina says, I look forward to it, but take enough time to heal up and rest as much as you can. Not bear in mind, what was I going to say? Believe it or not, that when I'm in a sitting position, I'm kind of more comfortable. If I'm in an upright sitting position, I'm a lot more comfortable than I can't really lie down, and like on a sofa type situation, if you're like watching TV, it's quite painful sitting down quite a long way and then sitting backward, and it's really painful getting up, sort of leaning forward and then getting up from a very low position of gravity. So sitting like I am now, almost like in a work situation, is not really painful. So that's pretty good. Stephanie says, I have to double check the time. I have a fundraiser for my son's robotics team Sunday. Okay, well, it's not the end of the world. I can do it by myself. But we do want to hear your review of Loving Vincent. So it's not that bad. Kelly says, do you have a recliner? I've got a sofa, but you sink quite far into it. It's not a recliner, though. I think, are you talking about a lazy boy? I don't have a lazy boy. I'm not quite sure how to say your name. Is it Beta Massage Broken ribs worst after a week. Yeah, it's not broken, it's cracked, but I've had some very bad nights so far. Yeah, I don't have a lazy boy. Karina says, turn towards the right because of my hip. Would be funny if it didn't hurt that much. Yeah, I must say I can't turn, I can't lean forward. I can't, it's difficult to put clothes on or take clothes off. That's also very difficult. What else? Yeah, anything that falls on the floor is very difficult to pick up. I can't bend over and pick something up. I've got to kind of go down vertically. I can't sort of bend over and pick it up. So that is definitely painful. Oh, by the way, the doctor called me yesterday, I think. The doctor called me and he said, I only have one fractured rib. He said he thought there were two, and he said the other fracture was where a rib passes another rib. So at least it's one and not two. So that's something. We need a fundraiser for a lazy boy for Nick. I don't know where we'd put it, but take small steps. It also doesn't hurt me to walk. I can walk, as long as I don't walk quickly, I can definitely take the dog for a walk. At the moment, I'm kind of been taking the dog for 2 walks a day, and he's pretty happy with that. Hey, Timmy. Okay, just stay in your pajamas. Charlotte D says that was such a beautiful place to ride and the sky was so perfect that day. So sorry you are hurt. Swift healing to you. Could Timmy load the washer? Yeah. I'm still planning on doing a little video talking about the incident that happened to me. For those of you who are still here, well, there's almost 200 of you. For those of you who are still here, I'll give you a little sneak spoiler into what happened. Or should I? Maybe I shouldn't do that. Kelly says there's some sort of device that looks like a cane, but has a claw to pick up things. Terry says, I banish all sneezes from you. I had a couple of small coughs today. I had a couple of small coughs and I almost had a big laugh when I was told the joke about you're not eating right. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Thanks a lot for that. Very kind of you. Yeah, I'm not gonna give away the punchline or the crunch statement, excuse the pun, in the thing, but I'm going to try and prepare a little video just with all the footage that I've got and show you deal with the anatomy of the bike crash as a kind of a crime scene. I better do it soon because I'm starting to forget some of the details, so probably need to do it. I'm not trying to tease you. I was actually thinking I should tell you, but it's probably important to have that as part of the narrative. Others, you might not want to watch it. So anyway, we've gone over the 2-hour mark. Thanks to all my mods that are here. Stephanie, Bria, I don't know if Jean is here, or Sharon Tuck. They're usually here. But Bria and Stephanie have definitely been manning the fort. And then all the members, thanks to the couple of new members that have signed up. It probably feels a bit weird because we haven't had members only for a while. I'll probably resume members only from next week, all the lives from then on. We're also gonna, we've got quite a few lives to do dealing with the affidavit and quite a few lives dealing with, a handful of lives dealing with Van Gogh. And then I might be doing, there's some additional coverage of Barry Morphew in terms of the defense motions that have come out of late. And then obviously when the trial is underway, then that we're going to be dealing with daily. So by the time by the time the trial starts, I think all of us are going to be super au fait with the details, and hopefully we're going to know not as much as the prosecutors, but we should know exactly what's going on. So that's going to be quite interesting, I think. Mel Stiller says, be well, everybody. Bridget says, can you keep the other Van Goghs open for us and just ignore silly people? Well, I've got to have there's got to be some members only content. The members are paying for something. But I might do, of the, I think there's 3 Van Gogh episodes left. I might leave 1 or 2 of those open to you guys. Terry Dean says, I'd love to hear where everyone thinks Sweet Suzanne is. I hope she can be brought home. Sarah Hathaway says, I'm always working during the lives. Glad to be here. Not there yet says, look forward to this journey with you in the next few months. Thanks a lot. Yeah, well, I'm on a journey of healing, and hopefully that goes okay. We seem to be in a world that is a little bit damaged at the moment, doesn't it? a world that is in a bit of a dangerous place, a world that needs to take careful breaths and move carefully and consciously over the next few days, right? Few days and weeks. So let's hope that our community, not just this community, but the community of our world can kind of hold itself together. Okay, guys, that's it. Thanks again to everybody. Thanks for those super chats. I just want to thank Gathering Place again. Thanks very much for that. I appreciate it. But all of those who've contributed, thank you for your interest in this. And obviously, there'll be quite a lot more content on the Morphew case coming up for the rest of this month and then going into April. So watch this space. Okay, all the best. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.